Welcome to our Research Like a Pro with DNA question and answer series. And this question goes along with one of our lessons on locality and ethnicity estimates. And as anybody who knows what we do here at Family Locket knows that we are just loving seeing what AI can help us do. And for a long time, I looked at my ethnicity estimates and just said, oh, that's fun. That's nice. And it's getting closer to my family tree. But lately, I've been wondering if it could actually do something to help me. And I will show you why I think that in just a minute. But I have found that AI is very interesting and it can give us some clues about our ancestry. So, this question, can AI help interpret DNA ethnicity estimates? I'll just make a note before we even get started that I realize that all the different DNA testing companies have different names for this. Some of them call it origins, others call it ancestry composition. But you know what? I'm just going to stick with ethnicity estimates because that's what we've been using from the very beginning, and I think it's pretty good terminology. We all understand what that means. So this is what I did for my very first prompt. And I will note that I just used Claude Sonnet 4.6 for everything I'm going to show you. I certainly could have tried other AI tools like ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity or some of the others I like to use. But this one I just stuck with Claude. And of course, it would be fun to use some of the others and do the very same prompts. A lot of times I like to do that, but I didn't for this one. So I gave it some interesting context, and I'll do an up close picture of these in just a minute. But I basically gave it a screenshot of my ancestry, ethnicity, and a screenshot of my fan chart in FamilySearch by locality. And then I gave it this prompt. You are an expert in genetic genealogy and analyzing ethnicity estimates from DNA testing. I want to know how my family tree aligns with my ethnicity estimate from Ancestry.com. Screenshots of both are attached. Provide me with an analysis in narrative and bullet point form. Okay, so if you've been learning about prompts, you'll see that I gave AI the role it was supposed to do, and I gave it a goal that I wanted to know how my family tree aligns, and I gave it something to work with, the screenshots, and then asked it to give me that analysis in narrative and bullet point form. So let's do a little bit closer look at the origins, and Ancestry now calls it origins, and you'll see that with this latest update, I have 8 ancestral regions. So I've got a group in England, a Celtic and Gaelic group, which is kind of a new group for me, and Western Europe and Nordic. So previously, I had had something that was just pretty much all European, pretty much all English. It was not broken out quite as much. So it's always interesting to see the latest update. Now, here is my FamilySearch family tree in the fan club. And I have also narrowed it to just showing me locations or to color coding locations. Now, note these are, I have not personally researched all of these different ancestors. I have done more research, of course, on these early ancestors. And some of these lines over here, my English and Danish lines, have been researched pretty heavily by other people. So I have been focusing on my paternal lines, which are all colonial America. And these are tricky because, as you can see, I do have some holes here, and I have no idea on some of these lines out here if they're even correct. I'm still stuck on some of these further in lines and making sure that they are correct. But I do have some different locations, and this is just based on their birthplace. So I've got some United States, some United Kingdom, some Denmark, some England, British colonial America, and some unknowns. So, the England and the United Kingdom could be probably lumped together. Sometimes that just depends on whoever's been doing some editing on this on the family search tree, what they put in there. But we get the same idea. So if you think this is fun and you've never tried this is how you get to it. You go to Family Search and click on tree, and then often it comes in with a pedigree view, but you just click the little down arrow and then you can see fan chart. If you toggle on the options right here, then you can show all sorts of different generations from 4 to 7, and then you get to select what you want to see. And I did country. You can also select family lines, sources, stories, photos, research helps to find ancestors who have some of those things that you could work with. So this is fun. If you've never tried it, I encourage you to go see what you can find. So, what did AI tell me? Well, AI broke it down. And so, what I've done is given you the AI analysis here, and then as a reminder, what my ancestry ethnicity estimate said. So, it said where your tree and DNA align well. United States blue dominant in your tree. Yes, because my whole paternal side was pretty much US. And it says the large number of ancestors recorded in the US is expected as most were immigrants or descendants of immigrants from England, the British Isles, and Northwestern Europe. So we know that. We know that colonial Americans, there were of course some Germans and there were some others, but there was just a large immigration that came from British Isles. This doesn't represent a separate ethnicity, but rather the destiny of migration. So those ancestors trace back to the regions reflected in your DNA. Well, I agree with that pretty well. And then it talks about the England, yellow in your tree, southeastern England and northwestern Europe. Now, this is interesting because this is absolutely true. The southeastern England, I have one whole branch that goes back to the Kent County right there in the southeastmost southeasternmost portion of England. So that is absolutely true. And then the West Midlands, I also know family lines there. So the England color appears in the outer generations of your chart, consistent with ancestors who were born in England before emigrating. This is your strongest alignment between tree and DNA. And because all of these ancestors did immigrate in about the 1850s, yeah, this is not a surprise to me, but I do like seeing that it agrees with what I do know. Now, what about this Norway and Denmark of 5% and 4%? I know I have Danish ancestry. I'm 1/8 Danish, actually, and could have up to 12.5%, but it seems to be broken out a little bit. So I was curious to see what AI would say about this. And because Ancestry only gives me 4% Danish. And so it does recognize that the pink coded Danish ancestors have names such as Soren Petersen, Peter Christensen Kusk, Bertha Marie Christopher daughter, and that those are definitely Danish names. And it's consistent with a cluster of Danish ancestors 3 to 5 generations back. So, yes, that does make sense. Interesting that it doesn't really discuss Norway here because I would think that that would all be kind of together. And then we have a new interesting group here that popped in, and this is the Celtic and Gaelic and then the Western Europe. So it's talking about how in my tree, I've got all those ancestors on my paternal line that are British colonial ancestors, and that they could trace to Northern Wales and Northwest England. So I never really knew where those ancestors could be since I haven't traced them back yet. I just knew they were likely English or perhaps Scottish or Irish. I knew they were just likely UK. So it gave me some interesting tips. Many early colonial settlers in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Carolinas immigrated from Wales and Northwest England in the 17th and 18th centuries. So this time period makes sense for my early colonials. And having this amount of DNA coming from Wales in this area is very interesting to me. So I have ancestors with names like Briscoe and Welch, and we've always known that they were somewhere over there. And so this makes me think, okay, this might be where they are originating, which was actually new information and a new idea for me. Now it mentions this Norway. This is a potential gap or surprise. So now it's picking out things that don't seem to quite fit with the tree. the Norway, the northwestern Germany, and the Netherlands. So remember, it's trying to match up things to my family tree. So it says that some ancestors listed as unknown, the white segments may be Norwegian, German, or Dutch. That's true. And DNA from these regions can also appear in people with deep English ancestry due to historical Anglo-Saxon, Viking, and Norman migrations into England. So that is an interesting idea too, that this could just be deep DNA that I would never be able to track to a specific ancestor. It's just there in the DNA. But it is worth investigating whether any brick walls may connect to these regions. Well, I already know pretty much that the Norway goes with the Danish and is probably part of that. Then it does talk again about the Southern Wales, the little 2%, see if there's any documented Welsh surnames or origins. Then it made a nice table for me. I didn't ask for the table, it just decided it would do that and put the regions down, the percentage that I had inherited or that it thought I had inherited, and then the corresponding tree evidence. So this is something that I could copy and paste and put it into my project document for whatever, or however I'm tracking my ancestry ethnicity estimates, and then compare with the next iteration of it. But I like that it also, without being asked, gave me some recommendations for further research. So, investigate the unknown white segments, the most likely sources of the unaccounted Norwegian, German, and Dutch DNA percentages. But then it gives me the idea, it does a little thinking about this Schultz surname of mine, that it is German origin and could account for the Northwestern German percentage. And that is absolutely true because this is one line, thanks to the Pennsylvania Germans, that has been tracked back to the German area. And then examine Eisenhower. So it's also saying that's a well documented Pennsylvania German name. And that's true. That's also been traced back. And then the idea to upload to MyHeritage or GEDmatch for additional ethnicity tools and chromosome level analysis to help isolate which lines carry the Scandinavian and German percentages. So I haven't done that, but I could certainly take more of the tools and more of the results from those and maybe create a project in Claude or ChatGPT and put in all the data and see maybe what it could help me find. But it does give me the overall your tree and DNA are in very strong alignment. The core English, Welsh, and Danish is well documented. Okay, so now knowing that 23andMe actually has the best breakdown, well, Ancestry now is pretty tied with it. They're both neck and neck, but 23andMe does break things down differently, and I was curious to see what Claude AI would tell me about my 23andMe. And here they call it ancestry composition. So you can see I still have a bunch of European, British and Irish, some English, and notice the Midlands there again, plus 11 regions. So I get this broken down, and there is that Welsh again. And this is a specific little townland here or an area, the Ronda Sinon Tuff, or however we say that. A little bit of Irish. There's that Nordic. Again, some Western European, and then some odd ones, Greek, Spanish, Basque. Super curious to see what AI is going to say about all of this. So right away, it noticed that this is a much more detailed ethnicity breakdown from 23andMe than the Ancestry estimate. And I agreed with that. So it shows that 99.8% European with a detailed regional breakdown. And this high degree of European specificity aligns very well with your fan chart. Okay, so that's immigrant descendants from British colonial United Kingdom, England, Denmark, British colonial America. All that makes sense. So it talks about the British and Irish 87% and that it's the strongest tree to DNA alignment. And some of the interesting things that I thought this one did, because it is broken down, it gave me some ideas. Review your known English immigrant ancestors to see if any documented origins align with counties such as Staffordshire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Lincolnshire, or Yorkshire. So one of the things we could do, since we are getting a better breakdown is to ask it for some specifics of all the different counties in some of those areas, some of those subregions. So right away it can do a little bit of work for us. And then it talks about the Welsh, which I am really interested in. And it's that pinpointed region. It says it's a precise and useful clue. And again, it's going to tell me a little bit about it. It's in South Wales, Glamorgan. And combined with your ancestry result showing 2% Wales, this is a consistent signal, which I had noted, but it is good to have that pointed out. And then here is where I am fascinated. Investigate whether any of your British colonial American ancestors, orange, trace to Welsh, Quaker, or Methodist immigrants from South Wales, many of whom settled in Pennsylvania. Well, this is something I did not know. I had no idea that this could be a possibility. And for some of those lines where I have not traced them out of Tennessee or North Carolina or sometimes even Alabama, I need to get further back. And this idea that maybe this is part of my Welsh ancestors. This is really fascinating. And then the Irish, just 0.2% trace level signal, possibly from your shared Celtic ancestry with your Welsh lines rather than a distinct Irish immigrant ancestor. So I appreciated that idea that, of course, we're going to have some mixing in the British Isles as well. And that, this really isn't enough to think, okay, let's go Irish and try to figure something out there. But it said possibly, maybe something further down the road will give me more information. And then the Danish, and especially the East Jutland and West Jutland regions. And it noted this is the second strongest alignment and pulls out all the different Danish ancestral names here that are on the pink side. And then it explains that the subregion specificity is extremely valuable. And then it notes that many Danish Latter-day Saint converts emigrated from Jutland to Utah in the mid to late 19th century, a pattern that fits perfectly with your Utah-based family. So it's just picking up the Utah-based family based on some of the ancestors who were descendants of these Danish who were born in Utah. So it's jumping to a conclusion here, but it's absolutely accurate. In this case, it's perfectly accurate. So it does give me a research recommendation to focus on those parishes and particularly in the counties. Again, it gives me some counties and lets me know that FamilySearch has great Danish parish records. So there you go. That's some good research information. And then it pulls out the one where I could do some more research. This is the one that's got some French, some Dutch, Northern German, some Swiss, all sorts of interesting things. I have really no idea where it came from. And it recognizes that there's no obvious French origin ancestor, but here's some ideas where some French ancestry could have come from. Huguenots, who would appear as English, French Canadian lines, probably not. I haven't seen that. But this one actually is accurate. The Schultz line visible may have Alsatian, French German border origins. And the area where we have traced the Schultz immigrant ancestor is in Alsace, Lorraine, which is, you know, French German. It's right there on the border. So this was a good clue that it pulled out that actually is accurate. Then the Dutch and Northern German, consistent with Ancestry's estimate of 6%, Netherlands and Northwestern German. And then it lets me know that 23 is being a little more conservative on its percentage. And then again says Eisenhower Schultz lines are most probable sources, and maybe those Pennsylvania German immigrants. And then finally down to the Swiss, German, Austrian, just a small but notable signal. And again, it's just going back to Pennsylvania Dutch, that maybe that's where some of those things are coming from. And then the weird ones. This is the most unexpected result relative to your tree, the Greek and Balkan. But it gave me some ideas because honestly, I have no idea where this would come from. But here is a good idea. It's an ancient population admixture. So it can appear in people with deep British ancestry due to ancient migrations. And so that would make sense. Some of that movement within Europe all through the ages, or it could be a genuinely unidentified ancestor. So it's not saying it couldn't just be a random ancestor. But small percentages should be treated as tentative. So, good note. Now, here's another one that I was really interested in, this Basque. And it says, this is interesting. Basque genetic markers are distinct and ancient, and small amounts appear in people with deep Celtic, Atlantic European ancestry, including Welsh and Irish populations. So, this is very likely a reflection of your Celtic ancestry rather than a distinct Basque immigrant ancestor. Okay, I have actually heard of that and I had forgotten about that, that there were some of these Spanish or Basque that went up into Ireland. And so that is just opening my eyes a little bit to possibilities for deep ancestry. And then, as in the Ancestry DNA ethnicity estimate, it made a little chart here for me. And this time it decided to put in some fun little icons here about strong or good or unaccounted, partial. So I also thought this was fun, a fun way to break that down and remember that. And then it gave me some key takeaways. And the ones that I really thought were interesting, I pretty much know the Danish, so I'm not too worried about that. Same with the Midlands and the English regions. I have a good idea for some of those more recent ones, but not further back. The Schultz and Eisenhower lines are already pretty accounted for, but the unknowns are interesting. And I thought this was a good kind of a synthesis that Ancestry had a different idea than 23andMe, and that these differences reflect different reference panels and should both inform your research rather than be treated as contradictory. So I thought that was really a good insight into that, that we don't necessarily just throw one out. They just look at things a little differently, but they can both give us some ideas. So as I was thinking about this, um, I, looked at the key takeaways, and AI did generate this for me without me asking. And it said what it does well in this context. Yeah, and this is absolutely true. AI is really good at pattern recognition across multiple data sources. So it looked at my fan chart, two different DNA ethnicities, and cross-referenced them against known genealogical patterns. This kind of multi-source synthesis is time consuming to do manually. And that's absolutely right. I never would have taken the time to do this because it would have seemed too hard. And having AI do this for me really quickly did give me some new ideas. Translating DNA percentages into research directions. Yes, this has helped me. And especially if you're maybe newer to your tree, or maybe if you're working with somebody's tree that you don't know very well, they have shared their tree and they've shared their DNA with you, and you're trying to figure out something about their lines. This could be a really good way to just find some quick analysis, having AI help you. And then it flags some anomalies and it tells you that, this is an anomaly rather than simply accepting them. And then it can help understand why Ancestry and 23andMe return different percentages. So something else I thought of that we could do with this would be to put in the white papers for both, or all the different DNA companies, and then put in our ethnicity estimates from each one and have us kind of understand where the companies are pulling from, understanding their algorithms or reference panels. I did get some limitations, and so I noted that this was interesting. Everything in this analysis was based on screenshots of ethnicity estimates, not raw genetic data. AI has no ability to read a GEDCOM file, analyze chromosomes, etc. So it's just saying this is just based on screenshots. And then these are probabilities, not facts. It can only be as accurate as the data it is given. And remember, these are statistical predictions and will change, as we all know. And then it recognized it can hallucinate historical content. So when it provides historical context, such as that Welsh Quaker immigrants in Pennsylvania should always verify. So this is definitely something, if I'm interested in doing this, I would want to do some good research on if this is actually true. Does AI know what it's talking about? I would guess that there's enough training data that it actually would be right, but maybe not. and that it can't verify anything in your tree independently. So we know that it's just taking what we give it. And then AI should not, and responsible analysis does not treat trace percentages as proof of a specific immigrant ancestor. So I thought those were good limitations, understanding what it can and what it can't do. So as I was brainstorming some possible use cases for using AI in our research, we have all the information right there in our DNA testing company website, what they give us about our DNA matches, because when we click on a match page, we can see what their estimates are. We could take a screenshot and ask AI to analyze that. We could also, um, take a screenshot of the match tree, and hopefully you could get enough information about where people were born or died and have it do a similar analysis as I did with the fan chart. You can go to any person on FamilySearch, any of these deceased people, and look at their specific tree, and whether it's accurate or not is something for you to look at, but it could give you a good idea. Look at it by locality and use that to compare a DNA match and the origins or ethnicity estimates, and have AI do some analysis for you on, say, an important match. Maybe there's somebody you're really trying to figure out and you would like some of this deeper analysis to help you with it. So I think with adding AI, my takeaway is adding AI to our projects when we are trying to figure out our matches or even our own origins and ethnicity and our own unknown ancestors. AI is making it actually easier to do some of that analysis and help us. Whereas before we would just kind of throw up our hands and say, that's too much work, or I don't believe really that much of it. Hopefully you've seen in some of the examples I shared that maybe it can be helpful as it's getting better and better, and AI is really good at patterns and helping us see some things that maybe we did not see ourselves. So thank you and good luck as maybe you give a try to AI in your ethnicity estimates and have some fun exploring and seeing what you can find out.